Here to introduce that keynote speaker is our recently appointed Director of Clinical Operations, Mr. Nathaniel Hampson.
Thank you. Don't make fun. Change. Ooh, this is loud. Change. Not the 27 cents rattle around in your pocket, but change, which means to make or become different. Our keynote speaker tonight embodies that word in a lot of ways and on many levels. And change has been a big part of her life recently. There are a lot of other adjectives that describe Renee Shadley. Spunky comes to mind. She's also focused, she's driven, she's courageous. She's got a great partner in her husband, Case, and together they have forged a very powerful team, which positively impacts their own lives, the lives of their family, and the lives of so many more. And tonight she will impact yours. But before I invite Renee up here to talk about her story and share it with us all, let's talk about what change means in our little corner of the world. When you think about it, the word change is pretty dynamic. It can be exciting, it can be frightening, and it's about the only constant in healthcare right now. It's a 6-letter word that feels more like a 4-letter word sometimes. And it can be something as simple as changing your shoes, or in Renee's case, it can be a whole new direction in life. For those clinics that have embraced workflow, think about those changes. There's been emotion. There's been anger. There's been fear of the unknown because you're changing something familiar, something comfortable. But simply maintaining the status quo, we will never meet our true potential. And just because you're satisfied today doesn't mean that you won't be rewarded with something better tomorrow by embracing change. And then there are those changes that are the most difficult and often the most rewarding. And believe it or not, there are changes in our world that are more meaningful and certainly more impactful than changing your shoes or changing an office procedure. And I'm talking about culture. It can be a revelation that alters the very fabric of an office environment, and it takes just one person. Now, maybe that person is you. Maybe that person is me. Maybe it's one of our patients that we're privileged to take care of every day. It just takes one champion who can change the attitude, who can change the outlook, and ultimately change our collective future. But will you embrace that change when you have the chance? Or will you build a barrier? Will you stay comfortable and fight to hold on? Or will you fight to let go, knowing you could be something better? Because everything that stays the same, stays the same. This is a part of the story you're going to hear. And we've all been part of cultural changes in our lives. And my most recent experience with one of our offices has been truly inspiring for me. But don't mistake inspiring with easy. At first, this team was encouraged to change. And then they were asked to change. And finally, they were forced to change. And had they not begun their own cultural transformation when they did, they may not have been prepared for Renee. You might think that they were lucky to have someone like her come through the door. But there's a saying about luck. It's where preparation meets opportunity. If they hadn't been prepared when their two worlds intersected, it would have been more of a collision than a collaboration. But by leading change and being prepared by embracing a better culture, they've literally changed not only their future, but Renee's as well. I know there are offices out there with a great culture, but if yours could be better, will you be the one who leads the change? Will you be prepared for your Renee? Will you be emotionally and culturally present and ready to truly hear her story and grasp the awesome responsibility and privilege of caring for her? Or will you listen simply with the intent to reply? If you do that, you'll miss the chance for an entirely new and better future for your team and for your patients. And believe me, these changes are real. These changes are powerful. They're transformative. And it's why we're here. And it only takes one person. Mark Twain said, the two most important days in your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why. And maybe some of you already know the why. Maybe some of you are still searching. I think Renee Shadley has discovered one big reason why she's here, and I'm excited for her to share that story with us all tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to present my friend and our keynote speaker, Renee Shadley.
Story with you. I tend to be a little vocal and a little spirited in my conversation, so I'm just going to apologize for that right now. So since this is my story, I can't tell you that I was hit by a train, or I'm not a diabetic with poor circulation, or that I ended up with some crazy flesh-eating bacteria. My battle, until recently, was actually pretty quiet. And honestly, most of the time, I didn't even know that I was fighting it. May 20th, 1994 was the day that I broke my ankle. At 17 years old, my life changed forever. And I didn't even have a clue. Everybody breaks something at some point, right? My oldest, he broke his hand in a fight. My daughter, she slipped on the ice and broke her hand. And my youngest, you don't even want to know how many bones that kid has been broken and been in casts and all that kind of stuff. Most of us just go and get it fixed. It sucks. But we move on, and it usually doesn't change our lives. When you guys hear the word amputation, I think most of us will agree some very different images flash before our eyes. And they're usually bigger than life. My story, until recently, was somewhat quiet and pretty muddled. Almost like it really didn't even have a plot. Not that it wasn't eventful, I just never really connected all the dots. I broke my ankle roller skating. It was a simple crash, but with a not so simple break. And actually there was quite a few pieces to be put back together. The moment I fell, I knew that I broke my ankle. I told everyone around me. No one believed me at the roller skating rink staff. They yanked my skate off, and then they refused to call for any kind of medical help. Luckily, my friend at the time, Case, my husband now, was there, and he scooped me up and he drove me to the emergency room. After x-rays and discussions with the doctor, I was sent home in a soft cast for about a week and a half to let the swelling go down, and then they hauled me into surgery. My surgeon, Dr. Carlson, happened to be one of the orthopedic docs for the U.S. ski team. So it felt like I was in great hands. What I didn't know was, he'd already pulled my parents aside and said with a break like mine, he wasn't sure if I was going to be able to walk again. But he tried, and he promised my parents that he would do his best. I'm glad that he didn't tell me that, because the surgery went pretty well. He put me back together with some plates and some screws. And pretty soon I was right back on the volleyball court, bumping and setting, almost like nothing ever happened. Walking cast and all. I've been told that I've pushed things just a little bit. But really, everything was great. I was back in action, and I thought that I was fixed. But what I really didn't realize was I would never take another step without pain. It started off pretty small, and I didn't really pay that much attention to it, but over the years, it all started to change. In '96, I had my first follow-up surgery. It was pretty simple. It was all orthoscopic. They just had to take out a few loose pieces of cartilage, just so that my ankle wouldn't lock up. And then later that year, all of the screws and the plate and everything kind of started to fail. So I had to go back in for surgery and I had to take everything out again. So that went pretty good, unfortunately. I was back at home recovering and I developed an infection. So I had to be rushed off to the hospital again. So they cut me back open, they cleaned things out, and then they started treatment on an antibiotic-resistant staph. They actually had to grow it in a petri dish to figure out what would kill it. I sat in the hospital for about a week, and then they finally released me. After that, I got a little bit of a break. My health was good, I got married, I started my family, and then over the next 10 years, things kind of mellowed out, at least surgery-wise. But if you've ever met the Shadley family, I guarantee you there's never a dull moment at our house. But I was still in pain, and it started to ramp back up again. By January of 2006, I was finally at my breaking point. I needed to find some relief. I began getting cortisone injections in my ankle, and unfortunately, the relief never lasted. After several attempts, and finally an MRI, I was told by my doctor that if he didn't know any better, that I had an ankle of an 80-year-old. 2 months later, March 8th, 2006, I opted to have an ankle fusion. It was explained to me that I had no other options, and likely to reduce the pain in my ankle. So an ankle replacement wouldn't be available to me due to my age, my insurance, my activity level, and the lifespan of the device. What choice did I have? I needed my life back. And I was only 29 years old. At the time, my surgeon assured me that his method of fusion would allow me the opportunity in the future for a takedown and eventually to have a replacement after the technology caught up. But what he didn't focus on was the inevitable problem of further complicating my issue by speeding up the wear and tear of the joints around the fusion. The next few years, they weren't so nice to me. In 2009, I had 2 knee surgeries. In 2012, I was diagnosed, had surgery, and I was treated for thyroid cancer. In 2014, I had an emergency gallbladder surgery. In early 2015, I had an eye surgery due to an infection, and that one landed me in the hospital for 7 days. Shortly after that surgery, I actually had a disc rupture in my back, and I had surgery on that. And then October the same year, a surgery to remove some more bone spurs. And that sent me through the roof. During that surgery, a nerve was damaged, and in recovery, I started to realize that I couldn't even touch my own foot without excruciating pain. And God help anyone else that even remotely tried to touch it. So that led to yet another surgery to dissect the nerve, and now I was just numb. No sensitivity to touch at all. But of course, I could still feel that deep ache that never went away. This was also the first time I noticed that I wasn't healing as fast as I should be. And all of my operations were starting to take a toll on my body. I kept on getting hit with setbacks, and my body was feeling it. I was gaining weight, I was slowing down, and I started to feel like there was no end in sight. In early 2016, I had enough. I decided to turn my life around. I was at my heaviest weight ever. I needed to get my life back on track. I started walking every day. At first a mile, and then 2, and then 3. And then pretty soon I was up to 6 miles a day, and working out on top of it all. If I had the time, I would have done it twice a day. I felt great. By mid-July, I had lost almost 80 pounds. And I thought for sure that would have been the best thing for me. It was for my overall health, but my foot was feeling it. And in fact, on any day that ended in Y, my foot and leg would have been swollen to twice its normal size. And the only thing that I can figure was, it's time to go back to the doctor. I again with injections that did nothing, and another couple of weeks passed, and then I could barely walk. After some prodding on my part, we finally got another MRI approved, and the diagnosis came back, stage 4 osteoarthritis. As strange as it may sound, I was relieved, because in my mind, I knew I had to be getting closer for the time for that ankle replacement. What other treatment could there be? I went to the next appointment ready to hear some good news. What I got was a huge letdown. My surgeon, the one who had fused my ankle and made it a point to let me know that he set it up for a takedown and a replacement, didn't even think I was a candidate anymore. Instead, he wanted me to head into palliative care. In other words, at 39 years of age, I was in the best shape of my life. And after 23 years of dealing with this shit, he wanted me to stop all high impact activity and began managing my pain with narcotics. Oh yeah, and that's when he dropped another word, amputation, and said, come back in a month and bring case with you. I wasn't ready to hear that word. I went home crying, and I was pissed off at the world. I was alone, and I was terrified. I wasn't going to give up on the idea of having an ankle replacement, no matter what he said. So now I had to figure out what the next step was. Why he was saying I couldn't move forward with the plans that we had all along. You'll see in a bit that I don't take the word no very easily. So, you better have some really good reasons to back it up. So I started educating myself. I was reading medical studies. I was digging deeper. I was trying to get in touch with the doctors that my surgeon said he had trained under. I was consumed. You would have thought that I was in medical school with all of the articles just scattered all over our house. What I started to find out, though, was there wasn't a whole lot of success with a case that was similar to mine. In fact, I didn't find any that were similar to mine at all. My problem was not that I just broken my ankle, and not the fact that I had a fusion to deal with, but now in order to make everything work, I needed another fusion. And a very small chance of that even being successful. And then a takedown on top of that. And then doing the replacement, which again had an extremely small chance of any long-term success. That was a logical argument, but actually at the time it was the furthest thing from my mind. If this was the best thing for me, then why has this never been mentioned before? It wasn't like I had been in his office anyway every other week. Well, at least that's what it felt like. Why would he set me up for this plan and then just strip it away from me? That month drug along, but it was finally time for the follow-up. I had done my research, I had plenty of questions to throw his way, and I had case in tow. We waited in the exam room for like 20 minutes before he decided to show up. And when the door finally opened, he greeted us like there was nothing wrong. Hey, how's it going? How's the ankle? Obviously not the approach that I thought he might take. And of course, my response was, it sucks. And it's getting worse? What do you think? Why am I here? And finally, we just had a couple more quick exchanges here and there. And I finally asked, I was like, okay, if this was your leg, what would you do? He's like, well, I think your best option is amputation. All I can think is you've got to be freaking kidding me. And there you go with that stupid word again. Still not ready to give up. We asked some more replacement questions, which he skirted around. And when we asked a couple of the amputation questions, we were about 10 minutes into the appointment, and he looked at his watch, and he said, I don't have any more time for you. I have other patients waiting on me. Wow. It's pretty hard to swallow, right? I was like, wow, you've got to be freaking kidding me. And there you go with that word. Once again,
He's like, he's like, I think you should have a second opinion. I think you should follow up with Dr. Hines. In the meantime, I'll talk with my colleagues and I'll see what we can come up with. This really pissed me off. He was going to set me up for this, and then he doesn't even have time for my questions anymore. I was more than happy to move on and get that second opinion. I made the appointment with Dr. Hines that day, but he was 2 weeks out before I could get in. In my eyes, that was 2 more weeks to do some more research. And I dabbled with that stupid word, amputation, but mostly it was in my own head. I wasn't, talking to anybody who thought that it was the best idea for me, including my family. What I was really looking for was a doctor somewhere in the U.S. that could fix me. That's all I wanted. I just wanted to be fixed. What I knew deep down was my answer was actually staring right back at me. Yep, that stupid word, amputation, black and white as you can get. But I couldn't let it go. I started to reflect. I just turned 40. I've been through a lot in the last 23 years, and I had accomplished a lot as well. I had an amazing husband. I had 3 beautiful children. I had a college education. But my husband, who had been there from the beginning, has always seen me broken. My kids never even really seen me run. And everybody had been through more surgeries than they ever bargained for. My life had become their norm. And they were all pretty numb to it. Supportive, yes, but they were numb. Like it was just another day. This really made me think, how was I going to make sure that this was the last time? Was this really going to be the fix? September 28th, 2016 rolled around, and it was time for my second opinion with Dr. Hines. And I told Case that I better get some answers today or I just might lose my shit. I mean, really. Now, mind you, I could barely walk. But I walked into that office like I owned the place. But in my head, I was at my breaking point. I needed an answer. I needed something in black and white. I was so sick of the gray. So you can imagine that there was just a little bit of tension in the air. The door finally swung open, and in walked Dr. Hines. He introduced himself. Hi, my name's Tony. At that moment, I finally felt I had a person sitting in front of me. He wasn't just a doctor, he was an actual person. And the tension started to lift. We introduced ourselves, and he dove right in. I've heard a lot about you, he said. And honestly, it really didn't take me that long to review your case. It's pretty black and white. I was elated. Finally, someone who thought like me, black and white. The next thing out of his mouth was, what the fuck are you waiting for? Why don't you just cut this thing off? I was a little taken back. And I was, at the same time though, I was like, dude, finally, this guy speaks my language. I was like, thank God. I told him, I was like, that's what I was waiting for. I needed someone to be straight with me. Then he actually said he knows, actually, Renee, if you were my wife, I wouldn't let you go through another surgery. I would knock you out in your sleep and I would cut the thing off myself. I was like, well, thank God, but, whatever. Then he explained why the other options wouldn't work, why the next fusion was risky, why the replacement wasn't the best choice. He also said that if I wanted him to do the other surgeries, that he would do them. But he didn't think that it was the best way to go. His feeling was that eventually I'd be right back here in a few more years looking into the same option and getting the thing cut off anyway. That visit lasted for an hour and a half. Tony listened. He answered all of my questions. He didn't sugarcoat anything. I made up my mind right then and there. Case was shocked. Tony was shot. But I finally heard what I needed to hear. I wanted my life back. I longed for my life back. I was done being in pain. I was ready to shake up the world. And when I signed my name on that consent form to have my leg amputated, that's exactly what I was thinking. That was the day that I decided to open up a can of wax. And I didn't realize this, but I was going to need it over the next month. The plan was to move along quickly, so we scheduled the surgery for 2 weeks out. And everybody assured me that it would be fine, we'd push through insurance, not a problem. Case and I, we were shocked. We needed to get our ducks in a row. But we didn't have ducks. We had squirrels. Really, we had squirrels.
It's true.
Yes, it's very true. The ride home was pretty quiet. Tony had given me a few numbers of fellow amputees in the community to call and connect with, in case said, hey, let's just make some of those phone calls. I wasn't quite ready to do that yet. I still had a lot of processing to do. How was I going to tell the kids? How was I going to tell my mom and dad? How was I going to tell my friends? I started to mourn the loss of my leg right then and there. When we got home, I broke the news to my parents, and instead of fear, I heard words of encouragement. This took me by surprise. And what I didn't know was that Case had already prepared them for this news. He explained to them in detail before Tony even explained to me. And they were ready. The kids, they took it pretty well. They were a little mad at first, not with me, but that I was having another surgery. And, they were a little scared by the gravity of the whole thing. Why you, Mom? You've already had your fight. You've already paid your dues. It took a while, but they finally came around. The preparation was next. Up to this point, we just searched ink replacement. Now we had a whole other thing to dive into. And we only had 2 weeks to do it in. This was the biggest thing that we'd ever really tackled, so we both buckled down and we really started our research. We made those phone calls. We invited amputees to our house. We met with them at their work. We had coffee with them. We talked with them on the phone. And we put them around our family so that they can ask those questions as well. I had until October 11th to get everything squared away. At least that's what I thought. But it turned out that was just one of the first 3 dates that I had to prepare for. Up until now, I was fighting to get the answers. Now that I had them, I had to start the fight to move forward. The first surgery date came and went with no approval. Our insurance company was taking their sweet time. At least that's what it looked like from our end. Case had already rescheduled his work to spend the most amount of time at home with me and helping after my surgery. So this first delay started eating into that time and our budget. The surgery was rescheduled for the 18th this time. I guess there was time for more research, more emotion, more planning. But the real killer here was, I was planning to cut off my own leg. How many of you would want to sit around and think about that for another week? On the 14th, which was a Friday, insurance called, and a man named Steve proceeded to tell me that surgery was being denied. And that I had other treatment options, and that they seemed to be working just fine. And we're really sorry, but this doesn't seem to be medically necessary. Really? Well, let me tell you something, Steve. I'm out of flipping options here, so what do you expect me to do? When I got this news, I was doing some errands, and I was livid. How could they tell me that I had to live with this situation? What information did they have in their hands to lead to that decision? My daughter was with me at the time, and she'd just gotten her learner's permit. And I said, come on, Hannah, we're going to the center, and we're going to find out just what they sent over to get that decision. As cool as a cucumber, she said, I got this, Mom. I'm going to drive. I really needed that. We got there at 4:45, and I began asking questions. When I asked what information was submitted with the pre-authorization, the gal helping us said, well, your notes from your last 2 appointments and MRI results. Really? That's it? I was not coping well with this at all. And I said, I want all of my records printed now. She looked at me and said, all of your records? Yes, all of them. Well, we actually close in 15 minutes. That'll take just too long to print. And I let her know that I wasn't going anywhere. And she better start getting printing. Hannah was just sitting there like, yep, you better listen to my mom. There it was. My future was hanging on 2 appointments and MRI results. 9 pieces of paper. That covered about 18 days worth of time out of 23 years of history. 23, right there. Not enough information for you? Come on, let's get real here. Whew. So then I started to review these notes, and what I found out was my last surgeon, when he was documenting, he wasn't even truthful in some of his documentation. The insurance really couldn't have made a good decision on this information. On Monday, I called them and I let them know that I wanted to appeal the decision. They said that I'd be getting a letter in the mail in 12 to 14 days. That's where I stopped them. And I told them exactly what was going to go down. In fact, I'm going to head your direction right now, and we can take a look at this together. And no, I'm not waiting for that denial to get in the mail. So you can hold on to that piece of paper, and we're going to sit down, we're going to look at all these records, and we're going to fill out that appeal paperwork together. And then you're going to take it upstairs, and you're going to put it on the top of the pile, and it's going to get done today. When I walked through those doors, I was in fighting mode. I introduced myself to the receptionist, and her response was, "We've been expecting you." My mom looked at me and said, "I think I'm going to go sit down." I met with a gal named Maria, and she helped me fill out all the appeal paperwork and the complaint forms because I was filing a complaint. Of course I was, right? And then I proceeded to show them the last 23 years worth of all the shit that I've been through. And of course, when that head guy, Steve, he was nowhere to be found. You know, the one that gave me the information. Nowhere to be found. And apparently, he needed to make a phone call to discuss my case with Dr. Hines. So the next day would have been my surgery day. And unfortunately, things hadn't moved along fast enough, so we had to reschedule it again. So that night, Case and I, we sat down and we wrote a letter to the insurance commissioner. And we explained my situation, and then I emailed it off. And oh yeah, we posted it on social media. And we shared it on our GoFundMe page. And then it ended up actually being shared to the local news station as well. And lo and behold, first thing the next morning, I got a call from the insurance commissioner. We had a great conversation, and we figured that, you know, some of the long-term situation might be dialed in and be helped and all this kind of stuff. But then, you know, we were still waiting. And apparently insurance had another 14 days to make up their mind. So 1 o'clock that day, I got a call, and it was from the insurance company. My pre-authorization had been approved, and they were so sorry for any kind of inconvenience that they caused. We did it now to set the next surgery date, October 25th, 2016, also my son's 18th birthday. I don't think I'll ever forget that one. Didn't mean to take his glory away from him, but I was not waiting enough. The day of surgery, we met with Tony, and I asked him, I was like, hey, how did your conversation with insurance go? He's like, I never talked to them. I was supposed to talk with some douchebag named Steve. But he wouldn't answer my calls, and every single time he returned my calls, I was in surgery. And he's like, whatever you did in all my years of medicine, I've never seen a turnaround like that happen before. He's like, that was all you. And there you have it. The next day, I woke up missing a leg, and I was off to the races with my recovery. Really, the amputation and the recovery was the easy part. It was just getting there that was such the challenge. So how did I end up here at Pacific Medical? Actually, I think it was just meant to be. We did have to get here in just a little bit of a roundabout way. During my planning and research, everyone in town told me that I needed to go to Sprague at Summit Orthotics. He's the best guy. Well, of course, that's where I had to go. I had no idea. But that's all changing now. Meantime, I stumbled across Pacific Medical. I was shopping for some crutches, and they were the only ones in town that had the ones that I wanted. So when I came in and I met everybody for the first time, they were great. I explained what I was going through, and I asked them if they had the crutches that I needed. And they got me all set up and everything, but they all kind of had like some really confused looks on their face. And finally, Anami said, where are you going for your prosthetic? I said, go right around the corner to Summit. That's what everybody told me to do anyway. And she was like, well, you know, we do that stuff here too, don't you?
Exactly like that.
Yeah. We didn't know that at the time, unfortunately. And we already let them know that we started the whole process with Summit. You know, Kay started asking a few questions. And this was all so new to us. So we struck up a little bit more of a conversation, and we dove into the technology behind today's prosthetics. And Zach took us in the back office and showed us a video of the new leg that he had just built and explained the RevoFit system and a few other things. That day we felt like we had met a great group of people, and they even assured us that Sprague would take really good care of us. But they were always here if we ever needed them. Fast forward a month, I was starting the first process of getting my leg. We had a few appointments with Sprague, and we voiced all of our concerns and ambitions. We asked a few questions that we got roundabout answers to. But I guess, you know, for the most part, everything was going well. What did we know? If we asked a question about something and his answer didn't line up with what we wanted, of course he's the expert. I guess we must have been wrong, right? During that process, everything was always next week. And then a week would roll around. And then something would have pushed it off to the next week. In fact, at one point early in December, he asked me, is there a reason that you feel like you need to walk this year? Of course I need to walk this year. What do you think? Do you want to walk this year? Oh, I tell you, I was not happy. Finally, December 12th, it was time for my first check socket. I was so excited. It was time to make a couple steps. When I got there, he set me up between the rails. He brought out this wood block. He slid on my check socket, and then he propped me up on the block. And he asked me how everything felt. I told him. He made a couple marks on there, and he said, okay, I'll see you next week. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Am I not going to walk today? No, you can't walk on this thing. It's only for fitting. Okay, but will I walk on something like it next time? No, you'll have your carbon socket next time, and then you'll be able to take that home. You're going to shrink a whole bunch right off the bat. And then you'll get a new socket really quick. And then that way you'll have a backup. Oh, okay. I guess that sounds good. But what foot am I getting? Can I try a few out? I really want to try the rush foot. No, these companies don't have trial feet. That would be crazy. We're going to start you out on a basic K2 foot. From a person that was walking 6 miles a day, a husband that was 6'3" and couldn't even catch up with me. K2, seriously? And then what we can do is we can build a case for you and then upgrade your foot over the next year. And then that way we'll have backup parts. Well, what about the bellow system? Is that available? No, I don't think your insurance is going to cover that. Besides, it's just a gadget. And I don't think it would really work for you anyway. Wait a second, I have one more question. A gentleman that I met online, he said that he would like to help me get a running leg. How would something like that work? He really started to get mad at this point. His answer back was really blunt. If you get this free foot from somewhere, how am I supposed to make any money on it? Well, since when is this about you? Yeah, pretty crazy. Obviously, there was a little bit more to that conversation, but y'all get the point. We left that appointment a little more somber than we went into it. And as we drove away, I could just see that Case was actually mad. When I asked him what was wrong, he blew up. I hadn't quite processed everything that Sprague had done, but Case had. He knew going into that appointment what to expect, what to ask, and what he wanted me to get. Case has always been my biggest fan. He's always been there for me. And through this whole process, he has been a blessing. Case is a very smart man. Has an engineering background. And this leg stuff is like right up his alley. He gets it. When I asked him what was wrong, he didn't hold back. He wasn't mad at me, but he was furious with Sprague. He walked through every detail with my mom and I, explaining as he went. And that night, he posted a question all over the amputee community, and it was an overwhelming response back that we needed to find a new process. Rushfoot commented and pointed us in a direction of some information. But medical chimed in, and then other prosthetists commented as well. All but a few said, run. But where? There were only 2 places in town. And at the time, Hacknight was in a bit of a transition. Sprague made it a point to let us know this. We finally decided that it didn't matter. We couldn't start a lifelong relationship on a lie like this. The next morning, we called Pacific Medical and made an appointment for a consultation that afternoon. It couldn't have worked out better. Nami let us know right up front that they were in between prosthetists, and Nat was there, and he was filling in with the office, and he was more than happy to see us. We went to that appointment that late afternoon. We were really guarded, a little concerned, but we were very well educated. But also worried that we were burning some bridges. We came out a couple hours later. With a whole new outlook. It sounded like these guys actually cared. They listened to me. They heard me. They knew what I wanted and where I was going. I made a decision to cut off my fucking leg. We had a lot to think about. As we were driving away, Nat called us and let us know that if we wanted to come back, he could get the casting process going right then. But we let him know that we were going to get some dinner, but if the offer still stood, we would come back afterwards. What medical company do you know that would stay open that late? At 7 o'clock that night, Nat unlocked the front doors of the center and casted my leg. Just then, my story took a turn. I'd already won the battle for my amputation. But right then and there, I won the battle for my leg. Unfortunately, now I had to make the call to fire my current prosthetist. That wasn't a call that we were really looking forward to making, but at the time it felt pretty good at the same time. We explained to him that we thought that this wasn't going to be a really good fit for us, and that we needed to head into a different direction. His response was less than professional. He proceeded to let us know that nobody else was going to be able to take care of us, that nobody else was going to be able to work with our insurance, and that nobody else, especially PacMed, was able and would get me up walking as good as him. He said, I really don't know how to handle this. I've never been fired by a patient before. Guess what, buddy? First time for everything, right? By the next evening, we were headed back to the office, storm of the century and all. And for what we thought was just a test fitting. But instead, I walked out of Pacific Medical under my own power, on my own legs. Woohoo! With tears in my eyes, it was one of the best days of my life. Remember earlier when I mentioned that my story didn't really have a plot? Well, on that day, December 14th, 2016, my youngest son's birthday, I realized this story was just a prologue. My story was actually just beginning. I want you guys to know the power that you have on people like me. We only ask for you to listen. We only ask for you to be a part of our lives, for you to help us walk across the stage. That's all we want. Because we've already made the biggest decision of our lives. We're just asking you to help us take that next step in life. Thank you guys all so much for